So thank you so much to all of you for having tuned in for this session this afternoon. I'm happy to introduce you to our two discussants in the session 1 + 1 = 5, making synergies work. We have seen as part of the research and as part of the previous conversations that this is a crucial question that's become more of a necessity rather than a luxury and in the past year. And so we are curious to hear both from a research perspective and then from a practitioner policy maker perspective, how can we make it work? So I'm happy to introduce you to Professor Martha Maznevski. She's professor of organizational behavior at Western University, and she will be having a conversation with Cecilia Roselli, who's the director of the Norwegian Refugee Council's office in Geneva. So thank you both for having agreed to join us and share experience today with us. We're really looking forward to your insights. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marcia. And we're really looking forward to it as well. We think this is going to be a great conversation. And we're going to share some insights to start with, but then we want to involve everybody in a conversation around this. Because 1 + 1 = 5, not only is it really important, it's also really elusive, right? It's kind of the dream, the aspiration. We should be able to get synergies from coordination. But in fact, reality shows us that often 1 + 1 = 1.8. And so we need to be, it's better than 1, right? But it's not even 2 because the coordination costs. So what we want to be able to do is move that into a collaboration space. And I'm very interested in this question in a lot of different contexts. How do we get collaboration that builds on top of different ideas so that we take the ideas further, not just adding them up? And one of the really, really important things that we see when we're looking at cross-boundary collaboration is the importance of the structures working together with the behaviors. Okay, and what I've noticed in the humanitarian sector, and even over the last couple of days, we're talking a lot about the structures. So lines of credit, coordination agreements, agreements about roles. And all of those are really important, but without the behavioral support or the capacities, they're only going to get you to 1 + 1 = 1.8. It's the behaviors and the leadership around those behaviors that's going to turn it around into 1 + 1 = 5. And so Cecilia and I are going to work together a little bit. She's going to start by providing an example of collaboration that worked really, really well. And then together we're going to kind of pick it apart and look at what helped that collaboration beyond the structures that were in place. And then we'll have some dialogue around that and bring you into it as well. We'd like to hear about your examples of collaboration and how that kind of framing helps us to see what takes it further into the synergy. So Cecilia, why don't you tell us about that example you and I talked about?
Thank you, Marta, and thank you all for joining us today. You're right. I've been asked to present an initial example of a positive collaboration that I've experienced in the recent past. My background is on partnership, so I'm really thrilled to have this conversation. I also see my own organization, the Norwegian Refugee Council, currently developing its strategy for the next 4 years, putting really partnership at the center of all of our discussions. So I really would look forward to hear your feedback as well on what we are going to discuss. You can interpret partnership at different levels. We decided yesterday for me to start with an example coming from collaboration around a common objective, a common goal from a policy perspective. And I would like to share the experience in working together with other NGOs and with UN agencies in the past around improving flexibility and simplify procedures. This is a topic that is of interest to NGOs since many years. I have engaged since too many years now on this topic, and I've been discussing this in various platforms and fora within the Interagency Standing Committee, informally with NGOs, formally with UN agencies, in the grand bargain with a lengthy extent of meetings and discussions. And the topic was not really advancing. There were always bottlenecks. It was challenging to identify solutions that were possible to be implemented. Together with other NGOs, so with peers, we created an informal group. We tried to analyze the different grant agreements, to be very specific with you, that were put forward by UN agencies, came up with suggestions to simplify, harmonize the different requirements, and really try to point out where the areas where we felt there were low-hanging fruits for improvement. And things were not moving. Then all of a sudden, we were all hit by COVID-19 last year in April, and we were facing a challenge that was way bigger than our capacity to react. And all of a sudden, we all came together, and what seemed to be insurmountable became possible. And all of a sudden, we have been able to advance in 1 month and a half discussions that were lagging since years. So we have been able to produce a joint paper developed by UN agencies and NGOs on flexibility with clear ask to donors, and donors were able to respond to provide, to a certain extent, the level of flexibility that we were requesting. Some UN agencies have been able to make a quantum leap, I call it like that, when I refer to UNHCR, in changing the framework partnership agreement with NGOs to allow for a simplified approach and a move from a control freak mechanism to a mechanism that is based more on common sense and reality on the ground. There's a long way to go before we will be able to implement it on the at country level, but the framework is there and is available. So what made that happen? The shock was the first element, and indeed we were all faced with an enormous challenge. So we all came together. Then we immediately looked into our capacity to trust each other. So immediately we shared all our challenges. We were able really to put on the table where we needed each other. And then our complementarity became essential. And I really felt that these elements were able to trigger our advancement in our goal. Then I have to admit that as time went by and the situation normalized, even if it's not normal and we are still faced with an enormous challenge at operational level, then all the different constituencies went back to the usual standpoint, and it becomes now more difficult to make further advancement on the same agenda. So what I want to say is that we built on work that was already done at technical level. So we had things ready to advance, and that is important. But then there was really a common interest from all sides, a common understanding, and really the willingness to do things together. And that is the mind shift that I think is needed if we really want to advance and improve the system that we have now. I really liked yesterday the quote about the system is not broken enough to trigger the change, because I really believe that that is what is hampering our advancement at the moment. And I will stop here now. Maybe Marta, I don't know if you want to ask questions or...
Yeah, sure. No, that's perfect. Thanks very much, Cecilia. So great example around COVID. And I think many of you have seen interesting examples around COVID and this shock of the need to get together. What I'd like to do is just kind of run through some of the things that I see in the example that Cecilia just gave that help us generalize to other situations when we can get high collaboration and synergies. And then, I love what you're saying. Well, I don't, right? At the end, that it went back to normal. It really reminds me, I sometimes run a change exercise where I get, and you can imagine this, you should try and run it yourself. You get people to stand up in pairs and look at each other. It doesn't work so well virtually. And then turn their backs to each other and change 3 things about their appearance. Okay, look at each other, see if you can figure out what it was. And then you say, okay, now change 3 more things. And then people get really upset. Like the first time they kind of say, this is funny, and they figure it out. And the second time, some people get really upset. Some people find it easier. the second time, right? And so you know, you can talk about how it's difficult going through change, or once you get used to it, you get more ideas. But here's the thing: when you say, okay, everybody sit down, we're going to talk about this now, and they sit down and everybody puts everything back. Right? We go back to the way we were before. It's a very natural human tendency to go back to what was comfortable before, for a lot of reasons. So a lot of it is, how can we make these synergies stick? But here are 3 principles about how to move to synergies that we're seeing across situations that I also see very much in Cecilia's example here. As I said in the video, with getting synergies, we're trying to do 2 things. One is the formal structures are getting to coordination, so roles and responsibilities, and decreasing the effects of opportunism. So people can't take advantage of the system. There's fairness, right? The informal side of the relationships help you increase trust. And by increasing trust, you also get to collaboration, flexibility, and innovation. And so these 2 kinds of systems have to work together. So on the second system, which is the one where I do more of my research, here are 3 things that are really important. The first one is having a sense of, when you succeed, we succeed. Okay, when you succeed, we succeed. What that means is we've got to have a higher sense of purpose, an aspiration that is only possible when we're all contributing and we're all part of it. And so therefore, I'm not just focused on my own success, I'm focused on your success too, because without your success, we can't succeed. Okay, so that's the number 1. When you succeed, we succeed. Number 2 is a sense of together we're more. Okay, and this is a sense of understanding that everybody is bringing something important to the table, something complementary. And that when you put those complementary pieces together, we value each of them because together we can do a lot more. But we know what those pieces are. It's not just a general sense of, yeah, we know together we can do more. We actually know exactly what the pieces are, and we think they're all important. Now, I heard both of those very much in what Cecilia said, right? So the first piece was the shock of COVID. There's a need, and there's a need that none of us can meet alone. We all need each other. So a higher aspiration. And I can't be successful unless you're successful, unless we're successful. So very much a sense of that. And when we talked, Cecilia, and yesterday too, I heard a lot about value chains, right? Peter Maurer started to talk about value chains, right? This would be very much about when you succeed, we succeed. I also heard you say, Cecilia, together we're more, in understanding the complementarity of the different pieces. Everybody had their technical expertise already. Right, so everybody is bringing some expertise to the table, and we need all of those pieces of expertise. The third piece, which is the piece that started but didn't keep going, is the piece around that you called flexibility and trust, right? We can only have flexibility if we also have trust. And so the line for trust is, in these collaborative relationships, we check in, not up. Okay, so what that means is we check in with each other. How's it going? How can I help you? What do you need? We don't check up. How's it going? Have you checked the boxes? Have you done what you were supposed to do? Can I move on to the next thing? So it's a monitoring to help each other and support each other, because I trust that you're doing what you're supposed to do. So if it's not happening, it must be because you need help. Very different from a checking in to monitor to see, have you checked the boxes on responsibility, and can I go on to the next thing to see if they've checked the boxes? So check in, not check up. And it sounds, Cecilia, from what you said, is that check in, not check up happened at the beginning. Right, so there was flexibility at the beginning in the first part of the crisis, but as it became more routinized, it became more check up again. And as soon as you're doing check up, not check in, then you start to go back to the old patterns of coordination and not having those relationships. So let me come back to you, Cecilia, and just ask you, to respond to that. Does that make sense for looking at that collaboration and maybe helping you think about others?
Yes, thank you. Actually, that is perfectly true. And I think a typical, I can even corroborate even further the example by saying that then we went back into the formalized setup of the grand bargain, where you really have a formal process happening and where we are trying and doing our best together with colleagues, and some are also on the call, to advance certain agenda. But then, you then are faced with the challenges that are linked with the formalized approach. And then probably there are indeed certain blockages that are due to external factors that needs to be addressed. And this can be addressed only if there is an open and frank discussion about the challenges that is built on trust that you were mentioning. And there is a common shared understanding about complementarities. I think the system will not work if we are not coming together. We are all essential to the system. And I really think it's important that we value the difference that we have across the different constituencies and among the different actors. I also want to reinforce your point about changing the mind shift and the approach from a control model to a more egalitarian approach. The more egalitarian approach requires, for sure, more time. It's more time consuming and more efforts. You need efforts to communicate. You need efforts to build trust. You need efforts to have the right skills, interpersonal skills as well, to broker a partnership. So sometimes it's easier just to go through the formal setup and leave outside the soft skills that I think are really important when you build up a relationship, every relationship, but in particular a partnership relationship related to our sector.
Good. So let me just get a quick response on that too. And Cecilia, I know you had a couple of other examples of different types of collaboration. It'd be good to hit on that. More effort and more time. So trust is kind of the holy grail, if you will, of collaboration. And I often push back on leaders who say things like, well, if we have trust, everything is fine. If we don't have trust, nothing is fine, right? So everything is down to trust. Actually, that's true, right? If we have trust, everything works. If we don't have trust, then we really have to rely only on these formal mechanisms. But the thing is, you can't build trust directly, right? It is actually impossible to build trust by just saying, let's have trust. Trust can only be built through experiences with each other. Trust is a willingness to be vulnerable to someone else because you believe that they will look after you. And in research, we often distinguish between two kinds of trust. I call them head trust and heart trust. Head trust is, I trust you'll do what you said you're going to do. Okay, and it's based on a credibility. It could be based on reputation. It could be based on experience of understanding your expertise and valuing your expertise. It could be based on experience with you. Heart trust is, I know you've got my back. I know you're there to help me. I know you're doing the best that you can. And heart trust in particular is hard to build with reputation alone. It's really, you can only build it through these experiences. So the experiences of flexibility. And in the first days of COVID, we kind of had to have heart trust in people because stuff needed to happen. But then as soon as the systems can take over, often we step back from that because we're often uncomfortable to be in a situation of vulnerability. So I wanted to link that, Cecilia, to what you were saying about time and effort. Trust takes time and effort to build. Absolutely. And this is what building it in small steps by checking in, not checking up, right, is really helpful to building trust. But the interesting thing is, as you start to build trust, you can speed up. So it takes more time at the beginning, maybe. But once you build the trust, then you can use it, and you can use it to have momentum to build flexibility and speed on the ground. So it gives you speed later. And helping think about those two kinds of trust helps you kind of, you build the head trust first, and then use that to have these small steps of check in, not check up, to build the heart trust. So now if I come back to that, Cecilia, if you think about the other kinds of collaboration that you were talking about, different examples, and then we'll get some input from other people as well, how this is relating to what they're thinking about.
Yes, actually, in all these kind of collaborations, you need an initial investment, and how good is your investment from the start, then you have positive outcomes going forward. So the other example I wanted to share, and I've checked in a little bit with colleagues that are dealing with the consortia within NRC, is an example of a small consortium that we are engaged in Lebanon. And one of the success, it is a success experience for us, and one of the reasons why this is a success is related to the fact that it's a small consortium. So you have few actors. So yes, you do a huge investment at the beginning, but then it's easier in terms of maintenance and in terms of maintaining the relationship. We invested a lot in mutual learning. So in really sharing the experience, being open and frank in the way we were sharing challenges and trying to identify solutions. And we had honest conversations about, as you were saying, complementarities, weaknesses, and strengths. And there was no leadership and implementing partners mechanism entailed in the consortium. That is not always possible, but I really think that that's the way we should be heading towards, and have more of an egalitarian approach to our relationship moving ahead. If that is going to be the case, and if that is the model that we are keeping in mind, this will trigger more easily an improvement in terms of partnership modalities, also at transactional level. Because once you have trust, once you have the capacity to work together, once you have also a set of agreed rules and regulations, it's easier to implement the common initiatives that you have identified together. But in that case, again, being it in Lebanon, the element of the opportunity emerging from crisis is once again there, because Lebanon is a complex context, and I'm sure Ed can talk about it as well. But then the additional shock that came this summer with the blast, the additional shock of COVID is bringing the members of the consortium even closer. And that allow us to work even better together. And again, apologies for the background noise from my dog.
I love it. What's the dog's name?
Zag.
Doug? Yes. Say hello for us. It's great. So very, very interesting. Again, so consortium, a little bit of a different model from the crisis response to COVID. And yet there was a crisis that came in there that unfortunately galvanized, kind of brought everything together. But I like that because it's relatively small, having those conversations was a little bit more manageable than if it was a huge consortium, and you can really build the personal relationships. And as you said, be open with each other about the strengths and the weaknesses. So this is building towards trust. If you can be open with each other about both those strengths and the weaknesses as well, then that helps you move steps towards building this trust, which is the key to bringing things to synergy. I'd like to hear from a few other people at this point too. Bring some other people into the conversation, Cecilia. How does this resonate with your experiences of collaboration and synergy? Is there a sense that, you know, when something worked really well, does this describe it? And David, I see you've unmuted already, so please jump in.
Sorry, I was turning on the camera and
Good.
Oh.
But do you have an example of collaboration?
Well, in fact, we work with NRC, in fact, and for us, for MSF, that we have maybe a well-deserved, reputation of isolation and a point of arrogance. So, I mean, we understood that, that we needed to do things differently, and with NRC, we already have a formal agreement. So, yeah, I think there's very little option. I think it will take us time, like always. But as I said, I think this, and it's very interesting also. I mean, the element of trust, and I thinking of in regards to others, but I can think of even the internal dynamics within my organization, within MSF. Trust between the different MSF branches. So, it's something that we have to reflect upon and really invest on how we, regain trust between us, and we build on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, right? Sometimes the lack of trustworthiness or lack of willing to engage in trust outside our organization and partnerships is a reflection or a projection of the same kinds of relationships happening inside. People don't feel like they can trust each other, and then it's really important to dig through to what's the root of that. Honestly, I'm finding right now across the organizations that I work with that right now, after a year of COVID, is a point of very high tension within organizations. People have had too long of dealing with too many uncertainties, and that starts to create issues of trust that actually have nothing to do with behavior and a lot to do with other things going on. So at least if you can talk about it that way, then it can help. Yeah. How about other people's experiences around collaboration, building trust, building relationships, combining the formal structures with the informal relationships? I am really good at cold calling. So Mamadou, how about you? I know you have lots of experiences with collaboration.
Yes, I think collaboration is key in the work we are doing. Key, why? Because we don't have all the resources, we can't be everywhere, we learn every day, and we can learn in collaborating. And I think one of the key issue is collaboration. Collaboration, and in collaboration, I see the word complementarity. We don't have all the knowledge, we don't have all the resources, we don't have all the access we need. And to go through those problems, we can think of collaboration and complementarity. For me, that's the way. No organization can cover all the situation we have. So I believe that collaboration, complementarity, partnership are key in problem solving.
I think that's very wise and very nicely said. Have you experienced a really exciting, great collaboration that did all of those things? Do you have a story you can tell us?
Just one short story. When I was working with an organization in Senegal, we have, I will say, quoted expertise in saving and loans to women. And there was one organization in Guinea-Bissau who wanted to do that. And they don't have the expertise. They don't have the techniques. What we do is, instead of making a lot of blah, blah, they take their car, drive 1,000 kilometers, 500, come to us, spend 1 week touring, seeing how we do, and they go back and do the same. And now they are, I can say, better than us. And that was very simple. It did not cost $100,000. The other collaboration we have also was with UNHCR, with African NGO in West Africa region. We have had some organization who have some point in audit. What we do is to work with all those organizations and with UNHCR to look at what are the problems. They are listed on one side by those NGOs, another side by UNHCR. These are the problems. We put the problem together and we spend a week. And after that discussion, exchange, training, sharing of experience, after that, all the 2-3 years, no NGO, they were about 25, have a qualified audit.
Wow.
Very simple in my view, and that can be verified with Fatima, for those who know her, who was at UNHCR. So these are very simple things that can help improve our global capacity. And of course, we have a lot of disseminated expertise. The problem is we don't put that together.
Yeah, and that's what a great example. Thank you, Mamadou. And I hear lots of great things in that example. Again, it's what made it work was not the structures. It's not that the structures weren't there, but what made it work was the personal initiative of people coming together and then being open and vulnerable to each other. You know, even you saying things now like they do it even better than us, right? Just to say that, you've got to have some vulnerability about that. And clearly in the teaching, there was some of that too. We need each other. We've got different skills. Let's work on this together. Your success is my success. And those kind of relationships leads to these wonderful stories. I'm going to come back to Cecilia in a second, but first, Rachel, your dog has entered with us, so that's nice. But I bet you've also got a good story of collaboration. Maybe your dog can help you.
I walked into that, didn't I? With the dog is now asleep next to me, but
Aww.
super interested in your dog, Cecilia. Anyway, so maybe one thing that did come to my mind whilst you were talking, and particularly the example you gave about people changing their clothes and then turning around. So in small ways, I think in all our jobs we're trying to do something to model changed power dynamics. So this is a micro example, but we were recruiting someone to work on community-based protection. It was an international post because it had to cover multiple countries, but it could have been anyone who could apply. And community-based protection is all about the power of communities to drive protection work. So we wanted our partners and the community-based protection structures that we work with in different countries to be part of deciding who should do that job. And so we worked out a job description together. We did a recruitment. And when it came to the interview, we asked, and we had, I think, in about 4 countries, national staff who normally would not be at all involved in recruitments for a global level post, partner staff, and some input from community structures. And what we did was they helped us design the questions, but then we made each of the applicants record a short video, one in French, one in English, on some questions the community members wanted to ask them. And then they watched those videos and they gave us feedback. Not we want this candidate or this candidate, but these are the pros and cons or the strengths and concerns we have about different candidates. It took a long time, and I wouldn't do it the same way now, but it was so interesting. And what was particularly interesting was the feedback we got from the people involved, who said, yeah, this is great. We absolutely should be the people who are helping choose, especially when it's a community-based post. And we really like this process. And by the way, here's a whole lot of things we think you should do differently when you do it next time. And maybe we can lead. We have one fantastic partner called HERE in Eastern DRC that some people may know, and a guy called Augustin Titi who runs it, who, if you ever want an honest opinion, Augustin is your man. But that, for me, what was interesting also was my colleagues' reactions to it within Oxfam, and sort of saying, I never thought of that. Maybe we could try something along those lines, perhaps not as complicated as we made it for ourselves. And I wonder if we can all learn from small things as well.
I love it. What a great example, Rachel. Thank you. And I would suggest that even though it took a long time and you might not do it that way again, part of why you got to the outcome that you did is because it took a long time and it was complicated. Right. So what I hear you accomplished is not just getting a good person in there with better, right? This is a great example of 1 + 1 = 5, right? The criteria were more well thought through. The person coming in is better vetted. So the whole process of them coming in, they probably have a much better idea of what they're coming into because of that process. They're more accepted by the people there. And because, so that's already 1 + 1 = at least 2. But the added bonus of getting feedback about the process in a way that is inviting partnership, not just here's what you should do, but what I heard is kind of here are some ways we can work better together, right? Oh, that now we're getting to 1 + 1 = kind of 4, right? Because that is setting in place some really good trust and flexibility for next steps. And so fabulous example too. And so let's come back to Cecilia, because you've got a lot of experience on how to enable the partnerships, right? So what needs to happen behind the scenes? And, you know, Rachel's process that she says, I would never do this again. You know, maybe this is the kind of process you actually need to be messy through. How do you enable partnerships, Cecilia?
Yes, thank you. And thank you also for hinting to what I wanted to actually bring up as last point, which is this concept of becoming an enabler. And this links to what David and also Mamadou referred to some extent. So facilitating collaboration and partnership, even if and when we are not necessarily a leading player in that collaboration. And I see that happening more and more. Especially with those actors with whom we complement each other, but with whom, and I can see David nodding, the partnership with MSF, for instance, is one of these examples, but it can be also partnership with local actors with whom we work, and we value a lot for their capacity to be present, sometimes in locations where we cannot be, or partnership with actors with whom we do not have the understanding and the knowledge to engage with, but others like Oxfam may be better placed to engage with development actors. So I really think it's something that we should explore further, being also to a certain extent humble enough to say, this is not for me, but others can have a role to play. And I really think and hope that the strategy process we are embarking in as NRC will lead us in that direction. So I would like to thank you maybe for having had the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm not sure if we have more time to engage in this conversation. So over to you, Marta.
Right. Thank you, Cecilia. No, beautifully said. And I think one of the things I would echo, so first of all, let me just recognize that Rachel says she would do it again, just slightly differently based on what you learned. And I recognize that. I guess all I would encourage is don't try to get rid of all the messiness, because messiness is the opportunity for these kinds of relationships to be built. And I also hear that in what you're saying, Cecilia, the idea that it's important to mark that enabling collaboration is an important role and an important thing to pay attention to. Right. So if the discussions are all around what are the structures? What are the agreements? Where's the line of credit? How do we agree on who has access to it for what and how? If that's what the discussions are all around, then you'll never get to 1 + 1 = 3. You are unlikely even to get to 1 + 1 = 2. If you really think about what Cecilia was just saying as enablement, the importance of having enablers and being enablers, then you're going to be more open to these conversations of not just decreasing opportunism, but increasing trust and increasing the collaboration to get the synergies. So let me just come back to those 3 points. We talked about trust, head trust, and heart trust. You can't just tell people, trust me, it has to be built through experience. And to get 1 + 1 = 5, the 3 kind of steps to move through that are, first of all, having a sense of when you succeed, we succeed. So having an aspirational goal of something that we need each other to accomplish, and it's very important, and we're all part of that. Second, together we're more. So understanding, not just agreeing that we all have something to contribute, but actually taking the time to understand what it is that each person is contributing. And then third, check in, not check up, which is just a quick behavioral way of remembering that trust and developing trust is about checking in. How are you doing to support each other, not checking up to monitor and move on to the next thing. So we have a Nietzsche quotation here, Mamadou. Let's on paye mal un maître en restant toujours qui son élève. Ah, nice. Nice, that's beautiful. So thank you very much for a great conversation. Thank you especially to you, Cecilia, for helping us find all kinds of great examples and sharing your experience around that. It's I think it really made it rich. And thank you to all of you who chipped in, whether it was by text or with stories or being here and thinking it through and being able to take this to the next steps. Marcia, I'll turn it back over to you or whoever from the HERE team to close us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Martha, and thank you so much, Cecilia. We really appreciate it, and thanks for really bringing the issue of synergies much to the fore in terms of showing how it can look like in practice. Thanks to all of you who joined in. We're looking forward to seeing you in the next sessions, the regional sessions, the Western sessions starting at 5 p.m. This afternoon CET time, and otherwise we'll have the Eastern session starting again tomorrow morning at 9. Do use the conference portal if you want to have an idea of the discussions from the previous sessions, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.